So, I'm Natasha Wilkins. I'm not from Africa. I was born in the United States. I don't know my ancestry. The history that I know about me is my ancestors were taken from Africa and put into slavery. That's the extent of what I know about who I am. And so, in the search for understanding who I am, where do I come from, I traveled to Africa with a class in my college. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that right now. So, recently, I watched this TED Talk on fractals. Does anybody know what fractals are? One person does. Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know what fractals are described as an infinitely complex set of patterns that are self-similar across different scales. And they're said to have been discovered by a French mathematician in the 1970s. And while I was watching this talk, the speaker stated that fractals can be seen in various living arrangements in rural Africa as early as history records, long before the concept of fractals were ever understood. So I paused the talk after hearing that, and I thought to myself, how can you say that Africans were building in fractals before the concept was understood? Obviously, if they were building it that way, then they understood the concept. And so for me, this spoke of, once again, how Africa is portrayed as incapable of understanding this concept prior to European contention with, or as scholars like to say, discovery of the idea. And so it was not long after this that I took my second trip to the African continent, traveling to Sierra Leone, West Africa. My first time I visited South Africa. And so when I went to Sierra Leone and I told people where I was going, I was often met with a crazy stare, something like that, where people said to me, why would you go there? You always want to go to the worst or most dangerous places in the world. Well, Natasha, I just hope you don't die. Obviously, I didn't die, so I'm standing here before you right now. So, the idea of Sierra Leone in most people's minds is a nation at war. Child soldiers, blood diamonds, poverty. That's what people think of when they think of Sierra Leone, as well as many other African nations. In my experience in Sierra Leone, none of these characterize the country, not a single one. So, by all of the most widely utilized development standards, Sierra Leone is classified as being in bad shape. It ranks 177th out of 187 countries for the Human Development Index, which is a measure of health, income, and education. The per capita GDP of the country as of 2012 was $635. That means if all of the money in the nation that the nation gets in a year were collected and divided evenly among all the people there, each person would make about $635 per year. To put that into perspective, the GDP per capita of the United States is $51,749. It's a slight difference. Additionally, in Sierra Leone, it's said that over 50% of the people live below the poverty line. However, after seeing the peace and the functioning markets of the country, I began to question who in the world creates these indicators for development? Where are these ideas coming from? Who defines what development or progress is? Why is the United States defined as a developed nation while Sierra Leone is defined as a developing nation? Why should every country strive to have the same goals and to look the same? Why is everyone trying to build in this way? And so, my experience in Sierra Leone demonstrated that people in developing nations are extremely innovative, like this young boy, Calvin. He's 15 years old. He's from Sierra Leone. He takes things that he finds that have been thrown out, broken electronics and things, and he builds radios and other types of things from that. And in this innovation, they often have their own ideas how to effectively alleviate issues. And they're often only hindered by lack of access to resources. But more often than not, even that's not enough to stop their creative drive. They continue moving forward and doing great things. And so, in seeing the innovative genius, such as this here, where they use things from the earth to patch up the canoe that was leaking, while I was there, we went to see hippos, and these are the canoes that we took. We pulled over when one of the boats started leaking, and they fixed it right there on the spot. In America, we couldn't happen. That wouldn't happen here. I was amazed. And so, in seeing how they use the few resources they have to innovate things that are not only effective, but also environmentally sustainable, my notions about development and the perceived realities of the African continent were deeply, deeply challenged. So, for example, here, the road stops at the river, and it begins again on the other side. People in this community innovated a method of transportation to get cars across that not only gets the cars across, but it also financially benefits their community. They get paid for these cars going on this thing, and then they invest that money in their community to build the things that they need for their kids and themselves. So this system, again, it was something else I was amazed by. They took a wooden slab, they put it on top of a metal base that was hollow on the inside, and there are buoys inside of the base that ladle out the water, depending on which way the ferry is drifting, to keep the ferry on track for the men pulling the cars across. They did not wait for the government to come in and construct a high-maintenance bridge that they would then also have to rely on the government to come in and fix when it broke. They took initiative and they solved their own challenge in a huge and sustainable way. So, a little more about me. I'm a senior in agricultural and consumer economics with minors in both urban planning and international development economics. Since coming to the University of Illinois, I've had the opportunity to travel to Honduras, which is described as a developing nation, as well as South Africa, one of the few nations in the global south that is classified as developed. I have a tangent. I couldn't resist saying this. Okay, global south. This is a phrase we also need to question. South of what? Who determines the starting points for a map? Maybe we should look at maps from the opposite direction. Just a thing you should consider. Something I've begun to think about since my trip to Sierra Leone. So anyway, although my trip to South Africa was my first experience on the African continent, the discrimination of and incrimination of blacks, or people who look like me, in that country left me with a desire to travel to a place in which I would not be looked down upon because of the color of my skin. And so, lo and behold, a year later, my academic advisor told me to look into traveling to Sierra Leone with the class H499 in my major. Although I was not interested in agricultural production, which was the focus of the trip, and all I knew about Sierra Leone was from watching the movie Blood Diamond with Leonardo DiCaprio and all the craziness that happened in that, my experiences in South Africa and Honduras taught me to never, ever, ever judge a country by what the media says about it. So I signed up for the trip and I began my preparation. And part of the preparation for the trip was to learn about the history and culture of the nation. I read books like A Long Way Gone, Memoirs of a Boy Soldier by Ishmael Bey, a Sierra Leonean. And I went to cultural lessons for the class that were taught by a 1980s Peace Corps volunteer. And although she did an amazing job, I seemed to be the only skeptical person in the class about how well she could actually prepare us for, or verse us in the culture, as she herself was an outsider. She was a European-born American who was projecting her own notions of the culture, own notions onto the culture, just as we were. And so I was just wondering, how can she teach us about the culture of a place that she was not born in? Perhaps this was because I was the only African American going on the trip, and so I experienced similar things where people came to predominantly African American spaces and then felt they knew the entire culture. And so I just wanted to be a little aware of that. And so we learned about the shots we needed and other medical precautions we should take. We applied for our visas, which are good for 3 years, and so I can still go back. I just went this January, and we prepared to leave. Of course, my parents were nervous, but not because I was going to Sierra Leone, as many people might think. It was more of a general nervousness about me being so far away from home. My friends who were excited for my trip told me, "Have fun in Africa," a phrase that I now view very, very differently. Prior to this trip, I also would have told somebody going to the African continent, "Have fun in Africa." But since returning and having experienced the rich diversity of this continent, I have a new perspective. I feel that it's a great disservice to and belittlement of this continent to try to extend one experience in one country to the whole continent. It can't be done, and it shouldn't be done. So yes, I went to Africa, the continent, and I picked up every child that walked up to me, as you can see. But no, I'm not an expert on all things African now, nor am I qualified to attest to the African experience. However, I can say that I gained great insight into the inner workings of what is classified as development work, my desired career field prior to going to Sierra Leone. From this experience, I found that it's vastly important for change on the African continent to be African-led. Too often, people with well-intentioned ideas come to countries like Sierra Leone and create programs based on their perceptions of a need. but they fail to consult the people for whom the program is to be implemented to find out if the perceived need is really an issue, and if so, how they want assistance in its alleviation. Although often presented as impoverished and in need of outside assistance, my experience with the people of Sierra Leone was not one-dimensional. It was filled with interactions of a multidimensionality. And so, from this experience, I found that one of the unspoken emerging realities of the African continent is that the continent is competent. Africa is not a dependent continent in need of outside guidance to address its challenges. People there are finding ways to make amazing things happen that benefit them and their homes. They're doing things that people in the US could not fathom accomplishing without electricity using unsustainable tools. They're doing things like helping creating radios from broken and discarded electronics. Or like this man here, they're building homes from the dirt of termite mounds because they found that termite saliva has a component that makes dirt waterproof and much stronger than other materials. This is innovative and sustainable. I think, again, it's absolutely amazing. And so, as Africa moves forward, the future is bright. And I encourage everyone to take caution, for it won't be long before we're all blinded by the light of this continent.
Can we give another round of applause for all of the really great